murder. Yeah, yeah. Coming up next on Mental Health Marty, sex and dating. Yes, we're going to have a talk about it. We're going to talk about the raw truth of the matter. Stay tuned. What's up, everybody? Yes, it's me, Martina Sellers, your mental health hygienist, coming to you live and in living color from Southern California, where the sun is always shining. I am so glad that you are here tonight. I cannot tell you how excited I am about this show. But first, let me know how you're doing. How's everyone living, y'all? How you feeling in the midst of everything that's going on? We want to know how you're doing. Mr. Brock Williams, how you feeling, brother? Good to see you. Thank you for joining in. Please, tonight is going to be an amazing show. Heard about it on Twitter? Yes. Mistress Elisa. Hey, join us. So glad that you're on here tonight. We are excited, y'all, tonight about this show and about everything that goes on. But how are you living? How you feeling? How are you doing in the midst of everything that goes on? Tonight, before we begin anything, I definitely want to first address real briefly the shootings that went on in Buffalo, New York. Our heart goes out to all of those families. Our heart goes out to those who died. Definitely not knowing that when they went into the grocery store, that was going to be their last time being with loved ones, even being there. And my heart is heavy that these senseless crimes continue to happen to our people across the nation. And I'm with the other Black male therapists and other therapists who are saying hatred is not an excuse for meaningless killings, and hatred is not also the scapegoat for mental health. This is a serious issue, and when you mess up, you cannot hide behind mental health. That helps increase the stigma of why we believe it is not a viable science. It is not to be used as a scapegoat for you to use your hatred and for all your venom against other people to spew out. You have to accept for your responsibility, but we're not going to give him any attention because we're going to just continue to focus on those families. I cannot imagine the pain that these families are going through right now. So our hearts and prayers go out to all of them during this time. We cannot lose hope. But as I always say each week, we cannot continue to secretly suffer in silence in the shadow of shame, but we have to speak up. We have to speak out in order that we might be able to live. So again, to those in the Buffalo community, our hearts and our prayers go out to all of you. But again, I am so glad that you have joined us tonight on this particular show. But how do you stay in contact? Let me just say with this, Brock, thank you so much. first and foremost, let me remind you what the purpose of the Mental Health Matters with Marty show is. We are a show, a live show. You got us live, that is intended as an educational, a psychoeducational tool. We are not a substitute for your therapist. We are not a substitute for your psychologist, your psychiatrist, your doctor, your priest, your sex therapist, your first dating coach, therapist, or anything. We are simply a supplement to help you along this thing, this journey called life. And if you're experiencing any type of psychiatric emergency or medical emergency, we want you to go to your nearest urgent care or dial 911. Do not stay on if you are going through any type of crisis, but we want you to stay on if you want help in this thing called life. Because y'all know we need, let me speak for myself. Marty needs all the help he can get. Let me tell you, but I'm excited, y'all. So that's what it is. Now, how do you comment and how do we see your comments? I'm so glad that you asked that question. How do you engage with us? Whether you're on other platforms seeing us, but how do we see your comments? You have to comment through the Mental Health Marty YouTube page. You got to comment through that. And how do we see those things? We want you to subscribe and hit the bell so that you know every time we go live that you will be notified with that as well. And that's how we see your comments. Thank you, Daryl. Daryl, the Mac in the back, is doing his job. But tonight, let me get going, yo. Tonight. Dylan, listen, happy birthday and congratulations to my new cousin-in-law who is just got engaged last night. We're so proud and happy for you guys, man. Definitely. Tanya, definitely feeling sad all this weekend. Yes, we're definitely in mourning, but we want to continue to lift those up. And I agree with you, Tanya. We have to speak out against injustice and all these other situations that's happening tonight. But tonight's show, we're going to get a little dicey tonight. So let me tell you something. This show tonight is for the mature folk who does not mind and do not mind talking about the real deal when it comes to dating and sex. I call it the raw truth. Challenges of dating and having healthy relationships post-COVID. Now, you know, in this thing, you all know I'm a therapist, and COVID has brought out so many couples, and many folks, one, didn't realize that they didn't even like their mates. That's a problem. And so we're going to have these amazing experts come on tonight, and we want you to engage. So listen, this is not for the 13 and below, the 14 and below. I don't know why I'm saying that. 14-year-olds are having sex these days behind our backs anyway. So, but we need to have honest conversations when it comes to sex, sexuality, dating, and having honest conversations about it, because by hiding it and not talking about it does not make matters any better. In fact, it perpetuates a lot of problems that we have because we don't know how to have honest talks about what we like, who we like, why we like it, and whether we want more or less of a situation. So I am so excited, y'all, to bring on the show. I'm surrounded by two Englishmen tonight, Black Englishmen who are here in America, who are the experts. I've been following this young man for some time. I'm so glad. I call him the sex therapist to the stars. I'm trying to grow up and be like him. He's got this amazing private practice out here. Came across the pond some 9-10 years ago via New York, and now is in Atlanta, Georgia, the Mecca of the South. None other than, can we put our hands together and welcome to the stage and the Mental Health Matters with Marty show for the very first time, but it won't be this brother's last time, none other than Michelle Hunt. Yes!
Oh, wow.
Woo!
Wow.
Man,
that was the best introduction. That was an amazing intro.
Have you over here and on the show, man. I have been following your work and just so excited and loving the honest conversations that we are having. But for those who may not know who you are, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for introducing me, and thanks also for bringing me on. I think this is such an amazing platform. So I am Michelle Hunt. I am a psychologist. I specialize in relationship counseling and psychosexual therapy. I've been doing it for about
Wow.
21 years. I've worked in different fields.
Stop it. You're not that old to
Yeah,
be doing it for 21 years. No,
listen,
quit
I,
playing with.
I
You
started
started
young.
the. You started when you
I
were
started
2.
young. We're gonna go with that. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
But
Yes.
I've worked across different fields. I've worked in education. I've worked in
Hmm.
mental illnesses. I've worked in sexual health. I've worked
Yes.
in the school system. I've worked with young offenders. I've worked with
Wow.
reproductive health. I've literally done as much as you can do within the field. So I
Wow.
have had a private practice before, and then I just started a new one 2 years ago, specializing in
Okay.
psychosexual therapy. So I work with couples and individuals who have issues around sex and relationships, anything from erectile difficulties, premature
Hmm.
ejaculation,
Hmm.
vaginismus, compulsive disorders, just the whole gamut of sexual dysfunctions or sexual challenges that people have. And so far, it's been
Yeah.
good. Mental health is a huge, huge issue in the world, but especially in our community because
Yes.
there's so much shame and
Yes.
guilt that comes with it, and so many unresolved issues that we kind of just gloss
Yes.
over. If we can become successful with work and with money, then we ignore everything else. And obviously, we know that that's just a band aid that patches things for a short time, but eventually, we
Exactly.
can't sustain that. So, I'm very happy to be able to help people in a way that makes them feel comfortable, makes them feel assured,
Yes.
um, feel excited about the things that they're doing. And
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
definitely. And you mentioned earlier
Thomas.
about you mentioned earlier about celebrities, and I do have quite a huge, huge cohort
Yes, you
of celebrity
do.
clients. Um,
I'm not
but
worthy. I'm not worthy.
shut up. But one of the things I really enjoy about that is more and more celebrities now are talking about their mental health and talking about their
Yes.
therapist. So I
Yes.
literally watching my clients on TV. I'm watching them on these shows talking about their experience
Hmm.
in therapy. And I thought, wow, this is great that we
Hmm.
have this
Yes.
platform now. Where people are saying, oh, I go to therapists every Saturday. I go to see my therapist when I need something. And I think that kind of change is really important. So I'm so pleased to be here with
It
you.
is. What man? Excuse me, because we should be calling him Doctor Hunt. Uh,
Well,
yes.
I mean,
Listen.
titles are unimportant to me. It's the
Well,
work. It's the
I,
work
I get it.
that
I
really.
get it. It's the work. But listen, you got an earned a psychologist doctorate. So, this is one of them honorary ones. This is earned. You got the bills to prove it and the scorecard to show all the history of it as
Right.
well. Can I ask you a question? First, why psychosexual therapy? Why sex therapy? And what are some of the challenges that you're seeing amongst couples? And can I say this among Black men in particular?
Yeah. So psychosexual therapy is really pivotal for me because it's the
Mm-hmm.
intersection of counseling, therapy, but also the psychology of sex. So I study the
Yes.
psychology of sex. There's psychology in everything, but for me, I really
Yes.
wanted to experience what was sex about. What was it that
That's
kind of
good.
how do we develop our sexuality? How we do develop sexual behaviors, sexual thoughts, sexual beliefs, and so on. So I studied the
Mm-hmm.
psychology. So when I see clients, I'm not just thinking about
Mm-hmm.
their physical experiences. I'm also
Yes.
incorporating how they got to that place psychologically.
Yes.
So it definitely gives me an edge in terms of working with clients to resolve some of those issues that they do have. And one of the things that you mentioned, you asked about seeing, what I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot is people trying to kind of avoid dealing with issues. There's a lot of avoidance in our world. You mentioned at the beginning about using mental health as a scapegoat. I feel like we do that in
Mm-hmm.
so many areas of our lives. We use issues
Yes.
and things as scapegoats, so we avoid dealing with the actual issue. So in my
Issues
practice,
itself. Yes.
I always say, this is a space where we're not going to leave any stones unturned. We will
That's
get
good.
to that. We're talking about all of it. You're having
Yes.
erectile difficulties. Let's talk about where that started. Let's talk about why it is. You might go to your clinician, your doctor, and he might, prescribe
Mm-hmm.
Viagra. That's not what you're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting to the root of why your erectile difficulties is there.
Yes.
Oftentimes, it goes back as far as those childhood moments where you were abused, where you were
Yes.
molested, which has largely been ignored by a lot of people.
Especially,
So
and we don't talk a lot about. And would you agree that we don't talk a lot about, when all the time we think of molestation and rape and any type of sexual offense, we think of the male being the perpetrator and not
yeah,
the victim. And when it's done the
yeah,
other way around, because we're not supposed to talk about those things.
yeah,
And too much of our manhood is defined by how sexual we are, or how well we think we are sexually as well.
yeah,
And so
absolutely,
that has
absolutely.
that's psychological.
So much of
Yeah.
our lives, sexual lives, are psychological, and
Mm-hmm.
we minimize
Mm-hmm.
that down to behaviors. When really, before the behaviors even starts, there is your psychology working, to get to
Yes.
that. So one of the things you mentioned, which I think is really, really important to talk about, is abusers and perpetrators, and victims.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes those are interchangeable. So you can get someone who's a
Yes.
victim at one point, who then becomes a perpetrator at another point, and vice
Yes.
versa.
Yes.
So I think that is also something that I'm very curious about exploring with people, in therapy, is allowing them to actually be able to be vulnerable about that. You may have touched
That's excellent.
someone may have touched you.
Yes.
Um, it's not, and also abuse isn't always physical. Sometimes it's emotional abuse. You being called a
Yes.
sissy for your whole life,
Yes.
growing up by your grandparents, by your uncles, by the neighbors, that
Yes.
that will impact how you think about your self sexually, and eventually will
Yes.
impact how you engage with and what kind of sex you like, how you like to enjoy
Mm-hmm.
sex.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Exactly.
whether you're open about the things that you like, fetishes, for example, can be born from those experiences. And if you're uncomfortable with your fetishes, then that's something that we can discuss to get you to an place of understanding. Well, how did this start? Why am I enjoying this kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
did why did this
Wow.
turn me on as opposed to that? So
I
it's
love it.
very
I
interesting.
told
It's
y'all,
very
Dr. Hunt is the bomb. Yes, yes. Okay, I want to bring in Trey with us as well. Listen, y'all, he's not a stranger to the Mental Health Marty show. It's not his first time on here, but so glad to welcome back. He's staying up late for me as well. So none other than Trey Hamilton, the first date fix coach himself. What's up,
oh,
Trey?
Hello, how is everyone doing? Good afternoon, good evening, and for some of you overseas, good morning, early morning.
Good boy. Early morning,
yes,
early
very
morning. Oh,
early,
you
very
had
early.
your overseas folks come on. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, I
It's
might
Trey.
have
the wee
invited some
hours of the
people.
morning
Whatever,
back in
whatever.
England right
I was gonna
now. Hey,
say, yeah, if
Trey.
they're late blue, if they're staying up late, it's about what, 2 a.m., 3 a.m.?
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. I
It's
love
good
it.
seeing you,
Trey,
Trey.
remind us who you are and what you do, my brother.
I, Trey Hamilton is my pen name. I released the First Date Fix about 3 months ago, and you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. I'm a dating coach who help people have an abundance of confidence, mastering the first dates, and really finding someone that they're supposed to spend the rest of their life. I study dating and relationships on a daily basis, and it's my clearest intention to make sure that despite how crazy modern dating is, that people can find their person and ride off into the sunset together.
I love it. I love it. So we're still riding in the sunset. I love it. I love it. Yes, yes. Trey. See, y'all, I got these two Englishmen on my right and my left. So I may have to. I didn't get a spot of tea or nothing like that tonight. I have a little tequila, but we won't talk about that. But yes, yes, yes. I love this. Trey, hearing what Dr. Hunt has been talking about tonight, uh, how do you find that is so important, even when we're talking about, because your whole thing, and I love your book, is talking about dating and that first date fix. How can some of our previous sexual experiences and childhood traumas or exposures, as Michelle was saying, can affect us or even alter our first date experience, and how we struggle even as Black men putting up this facade because I got to be hard and all these other things, and talk through that. Talk to me, Trey. Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different facets to what you said, but when I think about the last one you mentioned, when it comes to being Black men, if we're going to be completely frank, our culture is
Yes.
is over sexualized sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Videos, with the movies, with the main protagonist. I've never ever seen a Black male protagonist in any kind of movie who's a bit shy around the women, who doesn't have any sexual prowess, and is a bit of a nerd. Like,
Right. Right.
those archetypes barely exist. And quite frankly, people who aren't Black see Black men as the smooth talkers, the men who are very, very confident, right? So there's that stigma that's there. So the average Black man has that to uphold to. And then there's so many different facets to, when you're younger and when you're older. For example, if you are younger, when you were younger and you didn't have a lot of sexual partners and you didn't have intimacy, you might peak a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
So then you might have people who are
Mm-hmm.
making up for something called sexual debt, where maybe
Mm-hmm.
they married their high school sweetheart, they divorced her when they were 24, and then they get back on these streets and they just go nuts because they've never really had, a genuine sexual chemistry with someone that they're dating, or have it progressed as they grew up. So, when you're younger, there are so many different facets to that. I mean, I could go on, but essentially, as Black men, when it comes to sex, I feel like we're really pulled in so many different directions. But the common occurrence is, as a Black man, I have to be confident in the bedroom. I have to take her to Pound Town. I have to know exactly what I'm doing because I'm a Black man. We are the alpha super machismo men in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But in
As the
addition
Bronx
to
says.
that, Trey, I think society puts that on us, but oftentimes we actually do it to ourselves because of what we've
Mm.
experienced. A lot of Black men, unfortunately, we're raised in a single parent household where we literally had to
Yes.
take on the role of man long before we even got to that age. So
Yes.
part of that is about having to grow up sexually in ways that doesn't allow us to really grow and be vulnerable. So when we
Mm-hmm.
get intimate with someone, that vulnerability, which would be helpful, isn't there. It becomes a
Yes.
weakness that we try to avoid, and that's where the kind of ego comes in. And now you have to be what society says you should be, or what you're thinking your partner is expecting
Exactly.
from you. Oftentimes, having conversations around sex and relationships and the things you like and don't like doesn't even come
Mm-hmm.
into how we engage with people.
So
It's like
Yeah.
people don't
why is
necessarily.
that so difficult for us? Yeah, yeah, why is that so difficult for us to have those conversations and to have, because I think we don't even know what healthy relationships look like any longer, and so we struggle with that. So I'm going to start with you, Michelle, and then Trey jump in. Why is it so difficult for us to have these conversations about just having healthy conversations about what is my role, or if I'm shy, or those things, and why do we struggle with talking about sex in our community when we've been over sexualized anyway?
Yeah. Well, the short answer to that is guilt and shame. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why we don't
Mm-hmm.
have conversations and why we speak
Right.
with our actions rather than our voices. I
Mm-hmm.
also think that in terms of healthy relationships, most of us think that a healthy relationship is one that lasts a long time. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. Some of our grandparents didn't have healthy relationships. They just didn't have the options to leave. So we're seeing that. And we're like, well, if as long as she's there or as long as he's there, then we're good. And not necessarily realizing that you have to build a relationship. It's not ready-made. No relationship comes ready-made. It's a process that you have to work on continuously. And in doing that, you have to be able to work on yourself in order to be able to express that to or partners, because we know that monogamy is not the only type of relationship that people are in.
Exactly.
And then secondly, I think this idea of talking about sex, and I talk about this often on my podcast, it's so much easier for us to talk about sex on a general level as opposed to speaking about sex for what we need for ourselves. Because somehow we're always looking at, am I going to be judged for that?
Exactly. And I think that goes back to that guilt and shame.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ray?
I mean, I think there are various facets to what you say. I mean, in the Western culture, we're very conservative with the ideologies and paradigm of sex in general. I always find it completely perplexing that, everyone's having sex, everyone's doing it, but you can't talk about it at work. You can't talk about it with, friends and family. You can barely talk about it with your partner. You have a very open and clear communication relationship. It's just the only time you really talk about sex is when you're doing it. So because of that, there are so many conversations that aren't happening.
And sometimes they don't talk about it. Even sometimes when they're doing it, they don't talk about it.
Yeah. And we live, and what he said is exactly right. We live in a world where everyone's getting braggadocious, social media, six-pack, money. I got it going on, right? And that makes sex even worse. Apparently, everyone's a sexual god. Everyone's, banging them out. Everyone's getting a gang of hoes. Everyone's having sex all the time. But in reality, people aren't having conversations like, to be honest, last week I couldn't even get it up. People aren't turning around and saying, I haven't had sex in years. People aren't turning around and saying, I only know one position because I'm scared to do other things. People aren't having those conversations. If you speak to any man and you say, yo, how's your sex game? He'll be like, yeah, man, you know how it is. No, I don't. That's why I asked. Like, these conversations aren't happening.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, I think you're so right. It's like this thing, People magazine, every month they put out the sexiest man alive or the sexiest woman alive. And a lot of times we associate that visual image of someone being sexy as them being sexual. And there are two different things. Some of the most sexual people I know are the ones that you would never find sexy because they don't look like a typical, sex siren. But they have a confidence in themselves that allow them to be more explorative sexually, as opposed to someone who People magazine might say, he's the sexiest man alive, for example. And I think part of what we're doing right now with this platform is giving people permission to have conversations.
Yes, we have to. When do you remember having that conversation, or did you even have that conversation with your parents? I grew up in a divorced household, and so I got to California because my mother wanted to put as many miles between my father as possible, Trey. So that's how I got to California from Ohio. And I remember at our family dinner, we're eating, minding our own business. And my mother looks at me at the family dinner talking about, are you having sex? I'm like, is this the right time to ask me? So I said, no, but RJ is. I threw my cousin under the bus. I said, but he is.
You're wrong. You're wrong for that. Wow.
Deflection and avoidance. I mean, people do it all the time. Deflection and avoidance.
Yes. I was like, no, but he is. But I let my mother, I'll give my mother credit for this. She goes, listen, I've been 16. You're hot behind the collar. You ain't got control of nothing. I'm like, I don't know if I want to have this conversation with my mother. But she was not afraid to have this conversation with me. And looking back now, I appreciate it. And my mother's probably watching right now. Hi, Mom. She's downstairs. But I can appreciate that it was a conversation that we had, and my grandmother, her mother, was just as bad. So, what you out there doing? And so it became for our family, which I appreciate about my family. We did have, I don't know if they always were healthy conversations, but we did have conversations about sex. And what I would probably appreciate just a little bit more was about having healthy conversations. Now, my brother still loves my aunt because he says she was the one who, she go to her house, she'll probably kill me. So I'm not going to say which aunt it is because she watches the show too, where her and her husband had porn all the time watching it. Like, oh my God. So that was my first experience. Stop it, Trey. Don't look at us crazy. We had healthy sex exposure. That's a whole nother conversation. So when were you
That
first
is a whole nother
exposed or had a
conversation.
conversation? That's a whole nother conversation. Trey, when were you exposed, or when did you ever have conversations about sex with your parents?
Never have, never will. Hell no. Hell no. I'd rather die. They don't need to know that. You know what I mean? Like they know it's happening.
Trey.
Um, no, I mean, the thing is, they missed their opportunity, right? Like when I was young, they never
Okay.
spoke about it. So it kind of gets to a point where I feel like when you're past 18, if your parents haven't had that conversation, they never will. And quite frankly, they don't really deserve the opportunity because the deed's already been done. And at that point, there isn't anything they could tell me that I didn't already know. And, boomers are just different. They don't get down like the way we get down, Like yeah, I only told my dad about transgender people like 3 years ago, and he was baffled. He was like, "What do you mean? But it's a man." I'm like, "No, no, Dad, that's not how it works." So it's kind of like it's just a different generation completely.
Yeah.
I hear you. Okay, Michelle, what about
Um,
yourself?
for, yeah, for me it was very different. My family is Jamaican, and
Okay.
typically Jamaicans are overly sexual. If they're sexual, they're overly sexual, and if they're conservative, they're overly
Okay.
conservative. My family
Right.
was very
Right.
liberal, very very liberal.
Okay.
So, and again, I grew up with my dad not being in the house. My mom was a single mom, but my grandparents
Hmm.
lived with us. So her mom and dad was
Hmm.
there. So I felt like I had like three parents. Um,
Okay.
and my mom was very, very open with us about sex. From the minute we were able to grasp a conversation, she was having it with us. There's three
Hmm.
boys,
Wow.
one girl. My mom would talk to my sister about, pregnancy, about inappropriate touch, about what men want. She would
That's
talk to
good.
me and my brothers about pregnancy. Don't let any man
Hmm.
touch you. Don't let any woman touch you. If you're going to have
Hmm.
sex, these are the things that you need to think about. So she groomed us to think about sex in a much healthy way, in a very healthy way
That's good.
that was much more
Yeah.
holistic and not the typical of most Jamaican families. Usually you just get sent out to do it and, come back if you need help. But, it was a very positive experience because, we kind of knew that if we ever needed anything, my mom would be right there.
Hmm.
She already set the stage for us
That's
to be
good.
open. She kind of opened it up
Yeah.
for us, kind of gave us that confidence. So I think that's part of why I am, nobody who knew me from a childhood was surprised when I became a sex therapist. They're like, you were talking about sex before
Right.
all of us. We were having sex and you were talking about sex. So it kind of set me up for very good. But, I encourage, and I have lots of godchildren, I have lots of nieces and nephews, and I
Right.
do the
Right.
same thing with them. We have conversations about sex, obviously in an appropriate way for their age and,
Sure. Sure.
comprehension. But, to Trey's point, I think once you get past a certain age, especially now in 2022, where
Hmm.
everything's so super exposed, there's nothing you're going
Hmm.
to tell an 18-year-old that they're not going to find on Google. You know, your
True.
opportunity would have been while they were still developing and growing, and you can actually impact them that way. So, I take the
Hmm.
opportunities now with the younger people, the children in my family, to be very frank with them about what sex is and not just to scare them away from it because we know that sex is pleasurable and people want to have sex
Hmm.
when they can, but to educate them so they make informed decisions about the type of sex that they want.
That's good. That's good. So talk to we talked about sex a lot, but can we flip it just a little bit and talk about what is a healthy relationship and how do I know when I'm in one? Trey, talk to me. First dating king.
Yeah. I think a healthy relationship is really always going to be if you feel like this person accepts you for who you are, good and bad,
Mm,
because that level of security means that you're willing to make a significant long term commitment with them. You know, if someone doesn't ever really feel like they're accepted with someone, there's so far that it can go. So it's true
mm-hmm,
acceptance of self because the strongest
mm-hmm,
relationships only get to where they are with the highest level of forgiveness. So it's forgiveness as
mm-hmm,
well and forgiving quickly. I also think just you could be doing anything with that person, and it's fun.
mm-hmm.
You know, I always tell people, look, when you go on a date, go on the boring, mundane date ever, because if you can have a good time doing that, everything else is pretty much going to work itself out. So for
Mhm.
me, I just think it's not an esoteric, you know, silver bullet thing that you need to have an amazing relationships. It's the basic fundamentals of reciprocity, respect,
Okay.
humor, not taking each other too seriously, and knowing that this person accepts you for who you are. If you can have those five core cornerstones, everything else is really an inevitability at that point.
Mm.
Okay. Okay.
Interesting.
Healthy
I
relationship.
like.
Healthy relationship.
I love
Yes.
everything that Trey says. I also think to add to that, it's really, really, really important in order for you to find acceptance from someone else. You have to know who you are as an individual.
That's
And
good.
I think
That's good.
so many people go into relationships not knowing who they are, but expecting to find that somehow with someone else. And I think that's usually
Mm-hmm.
one of the recipes for unhealthy relationship because now you're expecting something from that person which they may not have the capacity to give. They may
That's
love
good.
you, they may be there for you, but they don't have the capacity to figure out who you are while trying to love you. You have
Mm-hmm.
to know who you are. You have to love who you are in order to engage that other person into loving that person who you love. I think that's really, really important. Go on. You want to add something, Mark?
No, I'm saying because I love what you're saying because one of the first questions I always ask someone who comes in to sits on my couch is, "Who are you?"
Mm, yeah.
And of course, they always go, I'm so and so. So I'm like, no, no, I read the intake form. I got all that, but who are you? And and real talk, I've had grown men sit on there after the third time I ask it. I've seen
Mm.
them just be on full on tears because they're like, I don't know who I am. And I think it goes
And
back to that. Go ahead, go ahead,
yeah,
go ahead, go
and
jump in.
I think that's such an important question to ask because most of us as black men we identify
Mm-hmm.
who we are based on the titles that we've had. I'm a dad, I'm a
Yes,
brother, I'm a husband, I'm a
yes,
CEO of a company, I'm a business person, I'm
yes,
a millionaire. We
yes.
assimilate who we are in these titles that we've acquired, and we actually
Mm-hmm.
haven't figured out who we are stripped away of all of those things. And
Yes.
that's fundamental. When you can strip away all the titles, when you can, and that's one of the reasons I said to you earlier, I don't care about the title, because who
Right.
I am isn't wrapped up on my identity isn't about a title. It's about who I
Mm-hmm.
am. When I wake up in the morning with no one else there, no relationship, no
That's
family,
right.
just me with myself, that's who I really am. And unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
so many of us are uncomfortable with that person. We haven't
Exactly.
given
And,
us
and
the time to learn who that person is.
yes, and that takes a lot of time because I'm finding this pandemic forced us
Mm,
when we're at the stay at home and forced us to have a look at ourselves and most of the people, especially couples, did not like themselves or the relationships. So I
absolutely.
can't even begin to have sex when I don't even like you and I don't even want to have sex with you. So
Well,
how
there's
do
some
we get
people
to
who can have sex with people they don't like. You know,
well?
there's lots of people who have sex with people they don't like. In fact, I know for a fact that people come into therapy because they can only enjoy sex with people that they don't have an emotional attachment to,
100%.
which is problematic.
Facts.
That is extremely problematic. That is extremely problematic because then it makes you go to why then are So let's go down that street since you went down that street. So what about those people?
I'm just adding some flavor to what you're saying. You know, I'm just adding some
I love
dimension.
it, but you're right. Because I had someone the other day call me, and I'm like, I'm not your therapist, so don't call me because if we talk anymore, I got to send you an invoice, and I want cash.
Right. No PayPal, no cash out.
No, I need cash. Cash is king, baby. Cash is king. But why is it? They ask me, well, why do I get into the same type of relationships, or why are the same type of people always attracted to me? Talk to me, Trey. What, when we get in that vicious cycle and we find ourselves dating the same type of people, having sex with the same type of people, or these things, why do we get and how do we get in those vicious, horrible cycles and don't know how to get out?
So there's three components to what both of you are saying. And I want to go on the first one where we speak about people having sex with who they don't know. People only being able to have sex with people that they're emotionally detached to. This is something that when I got for real about dating, I came up against again and again. And it would always be the same thing.
Okay.
So I'd be dating a girl and it would be like the second of date, I'd be ready to put it down and it'd be like, hey, I used to just sleep with so many men I didn't care about, but I really like you, Trey, so I want to wait. And I'd be like, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? and that sort of stuff used to perplex me because I'm like, all right, so let me get this straight. If you didn't like me and there was no emotional attachment, I could have hit it on the first night. But because you like me, you want to wait, right? And that was always like a source of confusion to me. And I realized that for me, when it comes to intimacy, I can't deal with those kind of people because that's not how I'm wired. I would never sleep with someone who I wasn't emotionally attached with. And I know that's not the cliched thing for me as a man to say, but I started going for women who kind of were on the same page and saw intimacy the same way I did. So I think there's a lot of people, right, especially right now in this modern age of dating, who do that because sex is now being treated as, it's okay, man. You can just do it with whoever you want and there doesn't need to be any emotional attachment. To some degree, that is true. But just like anything else, there needs to be a balance because the moment there isn't, your mind forgets what true intimacy is. And that's a very, very hard road to come back from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that becomes extremely problematic. Go ahead.
No, I also think people are scared of intimacy because with intimacy comes attachment. And a lot of us have problematic attachment from our childhood anyway. So, when I see someone who's kind of avoidance of intimacy, I initially begin to think about what kind of attachments they have. And,
that's good. That's good.
It's really less about the sex or who they're having sex with and more about them and what their capacity is for attachment. So, I think there's two things going on. We live in a culture where sex has become a commodity. Sex is like the currency that is transferable. It's it's currency. You use it sometimes. You don't use it. You might spend a little bit more here. You might spend less here. Sometimes you just sometimes you want to splurge. Right. So sex has really become that way for a lot of people, and partly it's a good thing because it's allowing people to understand that there's different types of sex and there's different types of ways of enjoying sex. But the negative drawback for that is that if you have, problematic attachments, then you never really get to enjoy sex fully. You never get to engage your whole self in that experience. And sometimes you may engage your penis, you may engage your anus, you might engage your vagina, you might engage your lips, but you're not fully engaged in that experience. And for me, I want people to be able to engage in sex in a way that completely engulfs them so much that it becomes the most pleasurable experience they have. That's part of why I do what I do.
I love that
Yeah,
because most people
preach.
never get to that pinnacle of
No.
of enjoying the full experience of
Mm,
a intimate relationship, and all the joys that can come along with it, because we don't, one, I go back to, we don't know who we are, and when we don't know who
mm,
we are and we have not healed from whatever traumas or experiences we've have had, how can we even begin to engage into a healthy relationship and enjoy the true full package of what intimacy and
right.
sex can be like? And so my question really does become: how many of us are experiencing very little of true sex, of what the pleasures of it can be anyway, because we don't have
Oh,
the
yeah.
experience. Yeah.
I feel like so many of us just experience a little piece of pleasure during sex, and we don't actually enjoy the fullness that sex brings because we don't have the
Mm,
capacity to do that. And I also think, going back to Trey's point, when you're dating, what is the purpose of dating? What's your purpose for dating? Because if your
that's
purpose for
good.
dating is different from the person you're dating, even if it's a good date, you're not on the same page. You're
Yes.
not connecting in a way that is going to begin to build a true healthy relationship with that person. So I think
But you're
it's
requiring
always
me to
very
be vulnerable. I
absolutely.
don't want to be
So that's
vulnerable.
why
Wait,
we have
wait.
to teach men how to be vulnerable, and we have to teach men that vulnerability is actually a strength and not a weakness.
And not a weakness. Exactly. Exactly.
Biggest
Trey, you
biggest
were
strength.
chiming in. Yes, yes.
No, I think vulnerability for a man is probably a bigger strength because it's so unexpected.
Hmm.
It used to be my secret weapon when I was single because it was just kind of like, oh, I can't believe you're vulnerable. It's like, I know, right? But like, especially if you're a black guy, like people don't expect you to just be like, yeah, like this is what I'm looking for. My heart's on my sleeve. I don't give a fuck. Like it's kind of like, you know, when it comes to intimacy, it's so interesting when you talk about people aren't really experiencing it. They're only experiencing a small piece. I love how you lamented on that
Hmm.
because essentially you can't experience true intimacy with a one night stand. You just can't. You can't experience
Thank
true
you.
intimacy with a friend with benefits, with a hookup partner, because you don't fully trust them. When you have
Yeah.
sex with someone that you fully trust, that you love and they love you, it's actually kind of shocking about how different that experience is. And I don't say that to
Yeah.
romanticize it, but it doesn't even have to be love. It can be trust. When you have sex with someone who you trust, where you've been vulnerable with them, where you have open discussions, right? Where you know this is a safe space, it is miles different from even someone that you've been hooking up with for a month. You got a sneaky link with someone for a month. You're like, I know him for a
Right.
month. Yeah, we like these positions. It's night and day. And to this day, I'm still shocked about how different it is.
Mm. Yeah.
But look at the
Absolutely.
connection on so many different levels that happen, and now it just carries you over. It changes all your endorphins and your whole stinking thinking process, to now you see life from a whole different lens,
Yeah.
and just get to enjoy all of that, and looking forward to, we already know the connectivity and the power of being connected with someone. We already know that the life expectancy when you're truly in love is a lot longer, and what that
Mm.
does for you and your career. Here's Dylan. What are people looking for when they're dating? I think that question is based on a person's age. Oh, Dylan, we should have had you come in on the show.
I I
Yes.
also think I also think even more important than age is maturity. I think
Mm-hmm.
That
people,
that
it's
part.
about their level of emotional maturity. And I don't care how old you are,
Mm,
I think 50 and 60-year-olds who are still stuck as a 16-year-old because they haven't allowed
yes,
themselves to mature to a place that matches their chronological age.
that's
So
good.
I think maturity is way more important than than how old someone is in terms of what their purpose for dating is. And I also think
Okay,
that
go
I'm
ahead.
gonna just say this quickly. I also think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
dating has changed in
Mm-hmm.
our society right now. The idea of dating has somehow shifted to, you know, the purpose is not the same as it was before. I think before people dated with the idea of wanting to be in a relationship and spending these
Yes.
initial dates
Yes.
get to know whether that person is right for them or not. But sometimes
Yes.
people do it with no intentions of being in a relationship, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
a thing to do for temporary companionship or temporary sex or temporary hookups. And I think that when you're doing it for that purpose, it changes the intensity for one, and it changes how vulnerable you are with that person. It
Mm-hmm.
changes how
Mm-hmm.
much
Because
you
they're not.
trust that
Mhm.
person. It changes how much you engage with that person. So I think there's difference, and I know we're talking about the raw truth, so we have to say it like we mean it. And the fact is,
Yeah,
dating isn't the same as it was before.
that's true. Trey, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I think he's right. I think it isn't the same anymore. I would almost say there are probably, and this isn't based of any scientific notion, but I'd probably say there are three different sects of people, sects. So number one, the people who are traditional, who say, "Hey, I'm dating to get in either a long term relationship for as long as possible or marriage." Number two,
Uh-huh.
you get the people who say, "Hey, dating, don't want to get into anything serious, but I enjoy the company of a man or a woman or whatever have you."
Mm-hmm.
And then there's number three, where they're just like, "Look, like everyone cheats. No one's supposed to be monogamous. I don't believe in monogamy. I want to have multiple partners. I just want to hook up a bunch or be in a polyamorous relationship. I don't believe in any kind of traditions." I believe there are three camps, and yes, there are probably sub camps within those three camps. But dating has completely changed. But what hasn't
Mm-hmm.
changed is that everyone needs somebody. Like our bodies are literally made for each other. And yes, some
Mm-hmm.
people are happy being lonely, but there's only really a small percentage of people who are truly happy being lonely. The rest are just pretending because it's the thing to say these days. But I think when it comes to intimacy, what Michelle said was just spot on when it comes to, it really is that level of trust ultimately, because if you're dating someone just to date and you both agree that, hey, we just want to have some fun together, there's always going to be that precipice that you're never going to hit because you're both not fully letting each other in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
I
good.
love I
Michelle, I would
love what
love
you
to bring
said.
you on another. Go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh
Love what you
no, I'm
said.
so sorry. This is such a juicy conversation. I'm like, so much to say. Um, so I do think that as humans, the one thing that we all seek is love and validation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all seek those things. We just find different ways of manifesting them. So for some
Hmm.
people,
Yes.
validation in ways outside of a relationship. For some people, they
Mm-hmm.
find things to love as opposed to people, or
Yes.
animals and things like that. But fundamentally, I think what ties us in as humans is the fact that we all need love and we all need
Hmm.
validation
Yes.
at some level.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's just a
Totally
matter
agree.
of how we manifest that, based on our experiences. You know, thanks, Sean
Yes.
Lorraine.
Listen,
Yeah,
Sean,
I
you got
love
to
what
come
you
on the
said.
show. She's an amazing therapist out here doing amazing work with women in the Los Angeles area and really helping them heal from a lot of trauma. And her story, Sean, whenever your book comes out, you gotta come on the show and share this book. Her life journey has been quite fascinating. And Michelle, I would love to bring you on the show another time because we're hearing these polyamorous relationships these days, and talking about that because people have no clue what's going on there. I'm just going, okay, please tell me. Says uh, Miss Alyssa says, I believe people struggle to find fulfillment in relationships these days because they do not understand themselves, what is driving them. I totally agree with you. Hurt, pain, unforgiveness are some of the biggest. That's good. That's good. Michelle, do you want to talk about that a little bit and why those? I definitely agree. I would love to join you soon. Yes, thank you.
We should just get everyone in a big room and have a conference. Have a
I
whole
think so
convention.
too.
That'd be so
Yes.
amazing.
Hey, you
It
just
would
Well,
be.
manifested it.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
he
I mean,
did.
we have all these brilliant minds. Let's do it. But
Yes.
to answer your question about polyamorous relationship and polyamory, traditionally
Mm-hmm.
we've always thought that healthy relationships are only monogamous, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously that's changing. Like that, we're realizing now that people can have relationships outside of monogamy. There's all these different types of consensual non-monogamous relationships that people have. There's different titles, different headings, but
Mm-hmm.
there's
Mm-hmm.
non-consensual monogamous is something that I feel is really, really kind of just opening up. People are talking about it in movies. They're talking about it on talk shows. They're kind of expressing it in
Mm-hmm.
their music, their songs. And I don't think it's new. I just think people's acceptance of it is different now than it was before. We all know that our
Right.
granddad had,
Mm.
different wives and, kids from different cultures. It's just like, it's been going
This
on
whole other
for
family.
years and years and years, exactly. But it was
Yeah.
just never kind of spoken about in the way that it's been spoken about now and it's accepted in that way. And having that kind of
Yeah.
consensus, you do you, I do me, this is what our relationship's about. And I think that's
Hmm.
something that's great. When we talk about dating and sex, when you're dating someone, you want to know what's their idea of a healthy relationship. What's your
Mm-hmm.
ideal?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking I want to be in a monogamous relationship, and you're thinking that I'm just going to be one of your boyfriends or one of your husbands, then we're
Mm-hmm.
on different pages. We need to know that
Different
at the beginning
pages.
while we're dating, because we're never going to be
Yes.
fully completely happy with each other if we're not seeing eye to eye when it comes to what makes our relationship great.
I love it.
Hmm.
Can you guys believe we're at an hour already? Oh my God, this has gone by too fast.
When way
We're just barely
too
scratching the surface. Definitely, Trey. I appreciate you staying up late for me, baby. So, how do we get your amazing book, Daryl? Can you flash Trey's book back up for us, please? And how can we
Oh,
find this?
thank you.
Because that book, of course.
Yeah, it's on amazon.com.co.uk and all other major Amazon resellers. I haven't taken it off there yet because I'm still trying to learn their marketing services. If you really want to go on a first date, have maximum confidence, a bit of psychological healing in there as well, but I'm a psychologist to be clear about that. But the idea is that you walk in there with maximum confidence, feeling ready to take on the world, and whatever kind of relationship you're looking for, or whatever kind of dating scenario you're looking for, I want you to have that, because the reality is that, going off what Michelle said earlier, we all do want to be loved. We all do want, whatever way that is. I want to have the confidence and give you the confidence to do so. So that's my elevator pitch. And if you like the book, you can also follow me on TikTok as well. I run my mouth for about 3 to 1 minute videos every day.
Yeah, man, and you do those videos consistently. I'm not where you're at yet. I won't get there one day. But man, I appreciate Trey as always. Man, I appreciate you. Can't wait to see you in July when I'm in Ohio. Uh oh, just got my copy of the book off That's thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Michelle, you have Michelle, talk to us about how we can follow you. And also, my daughter just walked in the room, so sorry. Also, how we can also go to your amazing website for those couples or people who want to go on your website and get some amazing adult toys. How do we do
Oh,
that?
absolutely, absolutely. So I am not at where Trey's at. I don't know how to TikTok. It's just not my thing. But I am on Instagram. So I'm on Instagram at relationship and sex dot. The website is sextherapyforyou.com. And then I also have an online store, which is Sex Day by Michelle. And that's where you can get all your toys, all your, adult editions, your sexy lingerie for men and women. Everything on the site is unisex, by the way. And then, if you want to reach out and find out what I'm doing, on the website, there is an updated page with all the upcoming events that I'm doing, so you can reach me there. But relationship and sex stuff on Instagram, that's where I'm at most of the time.
Love it, love it, love it. And we were talking before then the pre-show, talking about you're going to be in New Orleans in
Yeah.
August. Am I
In
correct?
August,
Yes.
Naughty and New Orleans. That's where we get all the sexual liberated people coming in for some fun for that weekend. So I'm excited about that. And I do have a podcast as well, which is called "Let's Come Together with a Sex Doc," and that's really
Yes, Trey, you have to listen to it. He puts on his calming music, and then he gets real close to the microphone, and just like as we are doing these things,
it's kind of like after midnight. You know those radio stations that after midnight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Going for with it.
Yes, he
My
gives
man,
us midnight.
Yeah.
With his English accent, and the folks just go crazy. Listen,
I bet.
Well, finally, he has something in common with Trey now. He understands it. He knows how it is.
Right. Guys, I can't thank you enough. Listen, thank you so much for joining us for this amazing. I have frozen. What happened? There we go. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Mental Health Marty, and we're gonna get through this. I don't know, Daryl, what's going on with my connection here, but as always, we don't want you to continue to secretly suffer in silence. Okay, in the shadow of shame. But listen, Daryl, kick me over to if you are. I done lost my train of thought. Let me go back. We never want to leave you without any resources on how to get help. So if you're looking for a therapist or what have you, we have these great coaches here. We got Trey, guys. He can set you up with getting some coaching on dating. We have the Dr. Hunt himself, and he listed his website. Please check him out as well. But some other resources that we want you to check out. If you are in crisis, we want you to type crises to 741-741 because we don't want you not to have help. Psychologytoday.com. I'm listed on there. And also for therapy for Black men. If you need therapy, they do have grants out there. If you do not have the funds, Good Therapy, and also my business at marcelconsulting.com. Also, we want you to check out some of the merchandise that we have on mentalhealthmarty.com, mentalhealthmarty.com, because we want you to look at that website and check out some of the merchandise we have to support you along in your mental health journey. And check out my Stop the Stinking Thinking journal. Now, the book I keep promising you guys is coming out, is in its final editions, and that the book is coming out. So we have the affirmations along, and it starts off with day one, I am enough. Also, check out our t-shirt and hoodies with Black Mental Health Matters. In other words, Black Men Matters, especially in the light of everything that's going on today. Again, in this journey called life, we don't want you to continue to secretly suffer in the shadow of shame, but we want you to speak up, speak out, and live. But more importantly, always remember to enjoy your life. We'll see you next week. Take care. God bless.